Episode 1: The Dead End Road. The night in Vermont always descends quickly, bringing with it a biting cold and an eerie silence. The student's old Jeep, Liam, his girlfriend Maya, and their joking friend Noah stopped at the end of the gravel road, where a rusty sign clearly read, "Dead End, Danger." The car's headlights shone into a clearing swallowed by dense trees. "Perfect," Noah said, his voice mixed with excitement and nervousness. "Exactly where those ghost car accidents are rumored to happen. I bet we're the craziest people to ever come here." Liam turned off the engine. Silence immediately engulfed them. According to the records, there have been at least 10 fatal accidents over the past 50 years, all on this last stretch of road, with no signs of emergency braking. Liam, who was researching paranormal history, had led them here. Maya, in the back seat, zipped up her jacket. "Liam, I'm still worried. The legend says the spirit here is a hitchhiker, killed in 1974. She still waves by the road, and anyone who stops to give her a ride meets a horrible accident." They quickly set up the tent and lit a fire. In the flickering light, Liam elaborated. "People say her body was never found intact. The car that hit her also vanished. She's trapped here, and the ride she's waiting for is any car that drives in." Around 11 p.m., as they were chatting, Noah suddenly fell silent. "Did you guys hear that?" he whispered. They all listened. Amidst the chirping of insects and the cold wind passing through the leaves, there was a faint, unnatural sound. It was the sound of knocking. Knock, knock. The sound came from their Jeep, just a few steps away. The car had been locked. "It must just be a branch," Liam tried to reassure them, but his voice was trembling. Knock, knock, knock. This time it was clearer. The sound was insistent, as if someone was patiently standing outside and tapping lightly on the driver's window. Noah shone his flashlight toward the car. Nothing. Just the darkness and the metal body reflecting the firelight. "There's no one there," Noah said. Knock. This tap came from the rear window of the car, right where Maya had been sitting earlier. All three students nearly froze. The knocking stopped. "Let's go to sleep," Maya whispered, gripping Liam's hand tightly. "I don't want to be out here anymore." They quickly scrambled into the tent. The sound of the zipper provided a fragile sense of safety. At about 3 a.m., Liam woke up because of the cold. He heard another sound, this time not knocking, but a light rattling sound. He peered through the tent's mesh vent. The faint moonlight shone down on the clearing. Liam saw their Jeep. The driver's door was slightly ajar. "Noah? Maya?" Liam shook his friends awake. The car door. As the three of them looked out, the rattling sound came again. They realized it was the seatbelt, gently hitting the car body in the breeze. What chilled them to the bone was the door had been locked when they got into the tent. Maya stammered. "Someone opened it, or something." Suddenly, there was a sound from inside the car cabin. A weak sigh, followed by the sound of the old leather seat creaking as something sat down. "It's in the car," Noah said fearfully. A faint, tall, and slender dark silhouette appeared at the driver's window. It was the outline of a woman with long, flowing hair. She didn't move, but her face, if she had one, was completely obscured by the darkness. Liam, in a panic, grabbed his phone, turned on the video function, and zoomed in on the window. In a brief moment, the phone's flash illuminated the scene. In that instant of light, Liam clearly saw there was no woman. There was only a dark void in the driver's seat, but he could distinctly see a bony, skeletal hand resting on the steering wheel. The fingernails were long, black, and dirty. And then, the most terrifying sound rang out. The sound of the car engine starting from the Jeep that had been completely turned off. Rrrr, rrrr. The Jeep shook violently, the headlights flashing, shining directly into their tent. The hitchhiker's spirit had found its ride. The engine roared in a distorted, unnatural way, and the car began backing up, slowly and eerily heading toward them. "Run!" Liam screamed. The three of them tore open the tent zipper, crawled out, and bolted into the dense woods opposite. As they fled, they heard the Jeep's engine roar, not like reverse gear, but like the engine being brutally pushed, as if someone was flooring the accelerator. They looked back over their shoulders. Their Jeep, clearly driverless, was accelerating, plowing straight into the forest. The sound of metal hitting trees, breaking glass, and then a massive crash that shook the ground. Everything fell silent. No more knocking, no more engine noise. After a long while, the three of them cautiously, trembling, crept back to the scene of the accident. Their Jeep was mangled, deeply embedded in a large oak tree. The headlights were off, but strangely, when they checked the interior through the broken window, there was no blood, no sign of any person or spirit inside. The driver's seat was empty. Liam picked up his phone. The screen was cracked, but he managed to open the video he recorded. When it got to the part where the flash went off on the small screen, he and his friends clearly saw. The driver's seat was empty, but on the windshield there was a faint, moist streak. And in that moist streak, two skeletal fingers were etching a word. The word was, "Arrived." Behind them, from the dead-end road, another faint car knocking sound echoed from the distance. She had found another car. She was still waiting. Episode 2. Apartment 404. October. In Boston is always shrouded in a damp grayness, perfect for a gloomy apartment. Ilara, a young writer struggling with her debut novel, had just moved into the quaint old The Hawthorne apartment complex, known for its suspiciously low rent. Her unit, number 404, was on the top floor, advertised as having good natural light. In reality, it only had one window looking directly onto the brick wall of the building opposite. On the very first night, Ilara noticed the anomaly. She heard a very faint sound of sobbing, like a lost child, emanating from somewhere behind the bedroom wall. Initially, she thought it was the neighbors, but the crying always lasted between 1 and 3 a.m., and it carried a mournful, chilling resonance that gave her goosebumps. After a week, the crying stopped, but other phenomena began. One morning she noticed an old-fashioned perfume scent, sickly sweet and strong, pervading the apartment. This scent would appear and disappear abruptly with no clear source. It smelled of jasmine and baby powder, conjuring the image of an elderly woman. The climax came one night while she was typing. The old metal alarm clock, which always sat still on her bookshelf, suddenly slid off the edge and fell to the floor with a dry clatter. She picked it up, placed it back, but just minutes later, it slid off again. This time, she was certain there was no vibration or draft. Something had pushed it. Ilara approached the building manager, a grumpy old man. "Is there something wrong with apartment 404? She asked. He looked at her with annoyance. "You're the 7th person to rent that unit in the last 3 years. Unit 404 is perfectly normal. Are you having trouble sleeping?" Ilara searched the internet. She found a forgotten old article from 10 years ago. Mysterious disappearance at the Hawthorne. The woman's name was Lillian Vance. She lived in apartment 404. She vanished without a trace, leaving behind all her personal belongings except for a bottle of jasmine perfume and a blue evening dress. Ilara returned to her apartment. She began investigating. She pressed her ear against the wall where she heard the crying. This wall was colder than the others. She tried tapping lightly on the wall in a rhythm. Knock, 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 knock. This is me. She waited. She heard a response. Knock, 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 knock. I know. The rhythm was repeated, but the sound was hollow, as if it didn't come from the outer surface, but from inside the plaster. Ilara backed away in terror. She ran into the bathroom where there was an old built-in storage cabinet. She opened the cabinet and looked at the very back of the brick wall. She noticed a cracked piece of plaster. She pried it off with a dinner knife. Behind the thin layer of plaster, she didn't see pipes or wiring. She saw a narrow, dark, and damp void. And in that space, she saw the blue evening dress mentioned in the article. As Ilara prepared to shine her flashlight deeper, the overwhelming scent of jasmine perfume flared up, so potent it nearly made her fall. She smelled the fragrance emanating directly from the hole. A faint, strained whisper, almost inaudible, came from within, as if someone was being suffocated. "I'm cold. I'm so cold." Ilara backed away, her hand touching the wall next to the cabinet. She felt a faint vibration of something moving inside the wall, like a trapped animal scratching. She realized Lillian Vance didn't die elsewhere and become a ghost. She had been locked, buried alive inside the very walls of apartment 404, and her soul was permanently trapped in that narrow space. As Ilara frantically tried to put the plaster back, she heard the sobbing start again, but this time it wasn't weak. It turned into eerie giggling. The whispered voice returned, but this time it wasn't pleading for help. It became malicious and possessive. "You found my secret. You read my diary," referring to the book she was writing. "You're not going anywhere. Unit 404 needs a tenant. It always needs a companion." Immediately, the front door of Ilara's apartment slammed shut with great force, and the sound of the deadbolt clicking echoed, signaling it had been locked from the outside. Ilara rushed to the door, twisting the knob, but it wouldn't budge. Apartment 404 had sealed her in. The lights in the living room flickered, then went out completely. The room plunged into total darkness, save for the faint light spilling from the hole in the wall. In that dim light, from the hole in the wall, a bony, emaciated hand suddenly poked out, gripping the edge of the wall. It was reaching for Ilara. Ilara desperately looked around, but all exits were blocked. She was trapped, and Lillian Vance's new companion was ready to be welcomed. Episode 3: The Midnight Bell. The town of Redemption in Arizona was a arid graveyard of faded golden hopes. Decrepit wooden buildings and a rotting church spire were all that remained. Elias Thorne, an eccentric history researcher, had just won an auction for the town's most prized possession, the massive Redemption bronze bell. Elias proudly placed the heavy bell in the corner of his rented living room. It was nearly 2 meters tall, covered in green moss, and its surface was etched with images of miners at work. The rope to pull the bell had been severed long ago. The trouble began on the very first night. Exactly at 3 a.m., Elias woke up to a deep, resonant toll echoing throughout the house. It was the sound of the bell. Bong. The sound didn't travel far like a church bell, but sounded muffled, as if it originated right next to him. Elias turned on the light. The bell stood still, the rope still cut. There was no wind, no animals. He told himself it was an illusion caused by changes in air pressure or the expansion of metal. The second night, 3 a.m. Bong! This time the sound was louder and clearer. Elias walked up to the bell, placing his hand on its ice-cold surface. He felt a faint vibration, like the lingering echo of a powerful strike that had just ended. In town, the locals began to avoid Elias. An elderly woman, the owner of the only tavern still open, reluctantly told him the legend. "That bell is cursed, sir. It was cast in 1892 by mine owner Kinsley. He didn't use it to call people to prayer. He used it to signal tunnel collapses. When a tunnel collapsed due to his error, the bell would toll once. Kinsley would count how many men died, and he would order the miners outside to bury alive those trapped below, to cover up the disaster. He said work must continue, she added with a chilling tone. And the worst part is, the souls of those buried miners tied themselves to the bell. Every toll at 3 a.m. is the call for them to rise. They aren't looking for justice. They're looking for the bell's new owner for revenge. Elias returned home, his heart heavy with dread. He decided to get rid of the bell. But when he tried to push it, the bell, already heavy, seemed to have gained tenfold in weight and didn't budge. 3 a.m. Bong. This third toll exploded in the room. This time, there wasn't just sound. The entire room shook violently. Elias looked down at the wooden floor. Old coal dust and rubble began falling from the ceiling. It wasn't regular dust. It was hard rock and earth from the mine. Then he saw them. Faint handprints, stained with coal dust, began to appear on the surface of the bell. These prints constantly moved, as if struggling to push the bell from the inside. Elias backed away, staring at the wall behind the bell. Something was scratching within. Scrape, scrape, slash. The wall plaster began to peel off, and then a bony, blackened finger poked through the plaster. It wasn't a normal human finger. It was covered in soil, and the nail was broken. More scratching, and bit by bit, the souls of the buried miners began to emerge from the walls, from the floor, from every corner of the room. They weren't misty ghosts. They were materialized figures, covered in coal dust, with empty eyes and teeth clenched in silent fury. They didn't speak. They just trudged toward Elias, as if he were Kinsley, the mine owner who had betrayed them. Elias panicked and ran toward the front door, but the entrance was blocked by a massive pile of rubble and dirt that suddenly rose up from the floor. The whole house had become a collapsed mine. The bell tolled again, this time a frantic, continuous sequence of tolls, like a welcome. Bong, bong, bong. Elias was surrounded. He fell, his desperate gaze fixed on the bell. On the bell's body, a new, small, deep crack had appeared, and amidst the bell's frantic ringing, he heard the simultaneous, hoarse, and tormented voices of many people, echoing from the bell itself. Welcome, new Kinsley. You have found our bell, and we will bury you, right here, so the work can continue. The spectral miners began shoveling handfuls of black dirt and throwing them onto Elias. Within minutes, he started to be buried under a growing pile of coal dust and mine rock. The room had become his grave. Episode 4: The Witch's Mirror. The town of Salem, Massachusetts is always blanketed in an atmosphere that is both historical and somber. 4 young friends, passionate about urban exploration, Chloe, Marcus, Lena, and Jack, decided to break into the abandoned Hawthorne House, an old, dilapidated mansion rumored to be the final refuge of one of the witches executed in 1692. In the damp, spiderweb-filled basement, they found a unique object, an antique, full-length mirror, framed in black oak, its surface covered by dust and a shredded old velvet cloth. This is definitely a valuable antique, Marcus, always looking for profit, said, trying to pry it from the corner. Lena, who was sensitive to the paranormal, felt a chill down her spine. I don't like it. Something's wrong. It's too intact to have been left behind. They brought the mirror back to Chloe's rented warehouse space. After careful cleaning, the mirror's surface was clear. The glass was slightly convex, reflecting distorted, dark images. Immediately after the mirror was placed in the room, they started noticing strange things. Chloe looked into the mirror to brush her hair. For a fleeting moment, she saw her reflection grinning maliciously before returning to normal. She convinced herself it was the lighting. But for Jack, it was more serious. He saw his reflection in the mirror, secretly stealing Lena's wallet. A few hours later, Lena's money was indeed missing. Jack knew he hadn't stolen it, but his reflection had. They researched the mirror. It was called the Lilith Mirror, an artifact believed to belong to the executed witch Sarah Osborne. The legend claimed that the mirror not only reflected, but also contained a fragment of the dark side of every soul that looked into it. The witch had used it as a portal to create evil, conscienceless duplicates of the people around her. That night, all four decided to set up a camera to monitor the room with the mirror. Around 2 a.m., while everyone was asleep, the footage began to show horrifying things. First, the mirror's surface turned cloudy. Then, a liquid shadow began to seep out from inside the mirror like thick black ink. The shadow materialized into two human figures almost identical to Marcus and Lena, but they had pale skin, empty eyes, and a sinister smirk on their lips. These were the dark reflections of Marcus and Lena. The Marcus reflection walked to the refrigerator, took out a kitchen knife, and began to sharpen the blade. The Lena reflection opened the door to Chloe's apartment and silently slipped out. Chloe woke up to the noise. She saw a figure standing in the kitchen. "Marcus? What are you doing?" she asked. The Marcus reflection turned around. He looked exactly like Marcus, but his eyes were cold and soulless. He raised the knife. "I'm just preparing breakfast for you, Chloe," he said in a distorted voice, deeper than the real Marcus's. Chloe recoiled in fear. She called the real Marcus. The real Marcus was fast asleep in the next room, with no signal on his phone. Meanwhile, Jack, who was watching the live camera feed, saw the Lena reflection enter Chloe's bedroom. The Lena reflection climbed onto Chloe's bed and began to choke the real Chloe. Jack screamed, rushing out of his room. He confronted the knife-wielding Marcus reflection. "You're not Marcus," Jack yelled. The Marcus reflection sneered. "Well, I'm the better part of Marcus. The part not constrained by empathy. She's the better part of Lena." A chaotic fight erupted. Jack struggled with the Marcus reflection. In the bedroom, Chloe struggled to escape the grip of the Lena reflection. She saw the empty, lifeless eyes of her reflection. The duplicate was much stronger than her and was slowly stealing her air. Suddenly, the real Marcus woke up. He rushed into the living room, seeing Jack fighting with a man identical to himself. "What is going on?" The real Marcus was terrified. The Marcus reflection shouted, "He's the fake. I'm the real Marcus." In a moment of desperation, Chloe caught sight of the Lilith mirror. She remembered the legend. The duplicates would vanish if their reflection was destroyed. With her last ounce of strength, Chloe reached for a nearby wooden chair and threw it straight at the mirror. Crash! The mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. Immediately, the Marcus reflection and the Lena reflection dissolved into plumes of black smoke and vanished into thin air. Chloe gasped for breath. The four friends looked at each other, horrified and exhausted. Lena stammered, "What do we do with the fragments?" Marcus looked down at the shattered pieces of glass on the floor. Though the mirror was broken, in the smallest shard of glass, The malicious gaze of the witch, Sarah Osborne, flickered as if she was still waiting to create new duplicates from those fragments. Episode 5. The Forbidden Archives. The New York Public Library, NYPL, is a magnificent labyrinth of marble architecture and millions of books. Sarah, a young librarian, works the night shift in the Rare Books and Archives section. Her job typically involves organizing dusty old collections in almost absolute silence. One night, while inspecting the third basement level, an underutilized area that always smells heavily of mold, Sarah discovers a heavy metal door hidden behind a large mobile bookshelf. The door has no handle, only an antique copper lock. Engraved faintly on the door is the inscription, "Non tangere," do not touch. Sarah's curiosity is piqued. She rummages through the library's collection of old keys and, surprisingly, finds a rusty key that fits the lock. Click. The door opens, revealing a small, cold room filled with decaying books in leather boxes, entirely unlisted in any of the library's catalogs. This is the Forbidden Archive. In the center of the room, on an old wooden table, lies a large, human skin-bound ledger with no writing on the cover. Despite her fear, Sarah brings the ledger back to her desk on the main floor. When she opens the book, she realizes it is a diary written in the 1920s. The author is a former head librarian named Elias, not the Elias from episode 3, who was obsessed with communicating with lost knowledge. The diary details a seance ritual that Elias performed with a cult group right there in the library basement. The purpose was to summon knowledge entities, spirits that exist as information. But the ritual failed disastrously, leaving these entities trapped among the bookshelves and driven mad. As Sarah reads this page, the fluorescent light above her suddenly flickers violently, and a blast of frigid air sweeps through the corridor, even though all the windows are closed. She slams the diary shut. Crash! A thick book from the highest shelf, about 10 meters away, falls to the floor. Sarah rushes to pick it up. She sees the book is a rare edition on demonic anatomy. She turns back. The area where she was sitting is no longer empty. Standing between the shelves are tall, shadowy figures. They lack clear definition, but they appear to be composed of floating letters and symbols in the air. They don't approach, but they are extending arms made of old paper towards Sarah, making a rustling sound, like thousands of pages turning simultaneously. She realizes these entities were awakened by the diary, and they want it back. Sarah clutches the diary and runs deeper into the corridors. She hears whispering, not in voices, but in the sound of thousands of pages being torn at the same time. It is ours, our knowledge. Give it back. Give it back. As she runs past the history section, she sees something more terrifying. One of the dark figures has caught someone. It is the soul of the old librarian Elias, trapped. Elias is being wrapped around by the other entities. His spirit body is being stretched, torn into individual words as they attempt to absorb him. Don't read. You'll become a part of them. Elias screams in agony, but his voice is reduced to distorted textual noises. Sarah realizes that if she keeps the diary, she too will be transformed into their knowledge. She races to the main exit door, where the large clock is striking 4 a.m. She tries to open the door, but it is locked automatically. The entities are closing in on her from all sides, moving faster, their paper arms reaching further. With no other choice, Sarah runs toward the antique grand fireplace in the main reading room. She pries open the hearth, where ashes have accumulated over years. She throws herself toward the fireplace, and in one final desperate act, she throws the human skin-bound diary into the pile of ashes. Whoosh! The diary immediately ignites with an eerie green flame. As the diary begins to burn, the terrified entities let out a horrifying cry of pain, not in sound, but in the cacophony of textual chaos. The letters and symbols forming them twist into meaningless spirals, and they completely dissolve. Sarah crawls out of the fireplace, covered in ash and cold sweat. Everything returns to silence. She looks into the hearth. The diary is burned to dust. But as she stands up, she feels a heavy film of smoke clinging to her. She looks down at her hands and sees that a few words from the diary are floating, clinging to her skin. She escaped them, but she carried a piece of their forbidden knowledge with her. And now, they know who she is. Episode 6: The Slumbering Garden. New Orleans, Louisiana is a city of Gothic beauty and buried secrets. The young couple, Amelia and Thomas, just bought an old French colonial house in the suburbs, renowned for its large, dense, yet decades neglected garden. Amelia was a passionate gardener. She saw the garden as an exciting challenge. The weeds grew head high, but beneath that cover, she sensed a strange life force. She resolved to restore it. The first strange thing Amelia noticed was everything she planted grew with phenomenal speed and astonishing vigor. The roses she planted bloomed gorgeously in just 1 week, and the fruit trees bore unusually large and succulent fruit. Thomas, her husband, a busy architect, was initially delighted, but Amelia began to change. She became chronically exhausted, her skin pale, and her eyes were heavily shadowed, as if she never slept. She spent all her free time in the garden, even whispering to the flowers. One day, Amelia was digging deep to plant a new hydrangea bush. Her shovel hit something hard. She sifted through the moist earth and found a small, moldy bone fragment. At first, she thought it was animal bone, but as she dug around, she found more pieces, shaped like human finger bones. Thomas, upon hearing this, researched the land's history. He uncovered a terrifying, buried truth. The house was once a 19th century cotton plantation, and the garden behind it was the unmarked burial ground for enslaved people who died of exhaustion due to the harsh working conditions. Local legend said the souls of those buried here could not move on because they had no official graves. Their life energy was being drained into the soil, feeding the garden with a supernatural vitality. Amelia was in disbelief. She was utterly enchanted by the garden. She started acting strangely. She brought her own dead houseplants into the garden, and sometimes Thomas saw her secretly scattering an unidentifiable black powder around the base of the plants. One evening, Thomas checked some old security footage installed outside. In the clip, at 3 a.m., Amelia was not asleep. She was wearing a thin nightgown, holding a mug. She walked to a wilting rose bush, and he watched her nonchalantly cut her wrist. Her blood dripped onto the soil. Immediately, the withered rose bush sprang back to life with deep crimson petals. Amelia was voluntarily sacrificing her life force to the garden. Thomas rushed into the garden. He found Amelia hugging a large orchid, her face ghostly white and her eyes glazed over. "Amelia, what are you doing? We have to get out of here," Thomas screamed. Amelia turned around, smiling an eerie, unnatural smile. The smile was not hers. "Don't you understand, Thomas? They are showing me everything. This beauty needs nurturing. The people under here are hungry. They need to be fed." As she spoke, Thomas clearly saw on the damp soil beneath her feet thin, withered hands beginning to protrude from the ground, gently wrapping around her ankles. They weren't harming her. They were protecting her, because she was their nurturer. Thomas tried to pull Amelia away, but she resisted with unnatural strength. "You're hurting them," she hissed, her eyes looking at him with hatred. Suddenly, the vines of the wild grapevine nearby began to move. They weren't swaying in the wind. They reached out, coiling tightly around Thomas's wrists, tightening like ropes. Thorns on the vines pierced his skin. Thomas looked down. The garden had risen against him. He heard a whisper emanating from the earth, not in a voice, but in the rustling of leaves and the sluggish crawling of roots. "You are the new one. You do not love the garden. The garden will eliminate you." Thomas desperately tore at the vines, finally breaking free and bolting out the gate. He stood outside the iron fence, looking in. Amelia stood in the middle of the garden, completely peaceful, the vibrant flowers seemingly embracing her. Thomas knew he couldn't save her. Immediately after, he saw a horrifying sight. From behind Amelia, a tall, gaunt silhouette of a man in old-fashioned clothing appeared. The figure placed a hand affectionately on Amelia's shoulder. It was the spirit of the slave overseer, the one who had buried them. This spirit was bound to the garden, not for punishment, but to continue his duty of control and maintenance of this monstrous life. Thomas watched the overseer smile, a cunning smile, and the garden bloomed brighter than ever, magnificent and drenched in blood. Episode 7. The Stage Phantom. The Grand Royale Theater in Chicago was once a beacon of brilliance, now reduced to a decaying, darkened structure. Emily's amateur drama troupe rented the space to rehearse their classic play Macbeth. The reason was simple: the rent was incredibly cheap. From the very first day of rehearsal, mishaps began. Stage lights would flicker and abruptly turn off at crucial moments. The velvet curtain ropes would snap without any sign of wear. Emily, the director and lead actress, tried to stay calm, but she knew the theater had a legend. It was haunted by the spirit of Julian Marsh, a talented actor who hanged himself on stage in the 1940s after being betrayed by his lover and co-star, who stole his role and fame. Julian couldn't find peace. He still wanted to be the sole star of the Grand Royale. One night, after the rest of the troupe had left, only Emily and the male lead, David, stayed behind to practice. In the dusty old dressing room, Emily heard the sound of a piano echoing from the main stage, a sad, melodious yet haunting tune, despite no one being there. She opened the dressing room door. In the middle of the dark stage, a single spotlight shone directly onto one spot. There, she saw David practicing a monologue that wasn't in their script. "My star, you will never betray me, will you?" David said in a different voice, deeper and more dramatic than his usual tone. Emily approached. "David, what are you saying? That's not a line from Macbeth." David turned around. His face was pale, his eyes vacant, completely failing to recognize Emily. "My darling, it's been so long since I felt this complete," David said. He smiled, but the smile was that of Julian Marsh, full of arrogance and bitterness. Emily realized David had been possessed. Julian was using David's body to relive his glory and his pain. She backed away in terror. The Julian/David's spirit pursued her, but not to physically attack. He wanted Emily to be the audience for his insane play. He cornered her backstage. There, he pointed to an old theatrical costume hanging in a display case. A black vest, a white shirt with a bow tie. "Watch me perform, Emily," Julian/David whispered. "I'll prove to you, no one can ever take my spotlight." He began a frantic scene about betrayal and death, using the surrounding stage props, the sound of his feet stomping on the wooden floor, his laughter and crying, all echoed in the empty theater, creating a horrifying private performance. Emily ran up to the balcony, to the light and sound control room. She noticed the control board was operating by itself. Lights flickered, smoke effects puffed out from the wings. Julian wasn't just possessing David, he was controlling the entire theater. Emily grabbed an old microphone. She knew she had to drive him out by mentioning the truth he wanted to bury, the humiliation of his death. "Julian!" Emily screamed into the mic, her voice reverberating throughout the theater. "You're not a star! You're a coward who ended his life over a role. You were forgotten. You died on that rope." As soon as she mentioned the words "died" and "rope," Julian/David stopped acting. He turned up, looking directly into the control room. David's face twisted into a grimace. Julian's spirit was fighting for control. "You, be quiet," Julian roared. Then, the most terrifying thing happened. From the ceiling of the stage, an old frayed rope slowly descended, positioning itself exactly where David stood. David/Julian stared intently at the rope, as if hypnotized. Julian wanted to reenact the moment of his death. He wanted David to feel that humiliation. Emily knew she had one chance. She adjusted the sound levels, cranked the volume to max, and played a loud, piercing sound of a jeering and booing crowd. The sound of the fierce rejection Julian had endured on his final night. The violent noise shook the entire theater. Julian screamed a tremendous cry of agony. David collapsed. The rope was slowly retracted back up. When the noise ended, Julian was banished. David woke up, confused and exhausted, with no memory of what had just happened. They quickly fled the theater, vowing never to return. But as they drove away, Emily looked in the rearview mirror. The streetlight shone on her face. She saw a flicker of Julian Marsh's eyes in her own reflection, and she heard a whisper. "The lead actress. Someone always has to step into the role." Julian had left David, but a part of him may have latched onto Emily's soul. The leading lady who dared to challenge him. Episode 8. The Antique Camera. The city of San Francisco is always a haven for antique hunters and forgotten secrets. Elias Thorne, a different character, unrelated to previous episodes, a young antique collector, stumbled upon a bulky old Polaroid camera at a flea market in Haight-Ashbury. The camera looked ordinary, but had a classic vintage style and an old sticker inscribed with the words "Memento Mori." Remember that you will die. Elias took his first photo right there at the market. He captured a laughing couple. After a few seconds, the paper photo slid out. But the image didn't show the couple laughing. Instead, it was a blurred black and white photo of the same couple, lying motionless under the wheels of a bus, their faces contorted in their final horror. Elias was horrified. He rushed over to the couple. They were still chatting and laughing happily, completely fine. He tore up the photo. A few hours later, Elias heard the news. A couple was hit by a runaway bus at an intersection near the flea market. The accident scene matched the photo exactly. The camera didn't capture the present moment. It captured the imminent moment of death at that location. Elias became obsessed. He decided to use the camera to prevent death. He rushed to the famous Golden Gate Bridge and took a photo. The image showed a man in a dark coat preparing to jump off the railing. Elias immediately searched for the man. He found a desperate-looking man standing right by the railing. Elias rushed over, managing to hold on to and pull the man back just in time. The man was frantic but alive. Elias had succeeded. He breathed a sigh of relief. And when he turned back to look at the photo, a horrifying detail emerged. The photo hadn't changed. The man still jumped, but now he didn't simply leap. He was wrapped in a thick iron chain that emerged from beneath the bridge, and he was being pulled down with a powerful force, his face showing agony far more terrible than a simple fall. Elias suddenly realized the camera was not just a prophecy. It was a fate setter. Any intervention he made only caused death to be more brutal and inescapable. He hurriedly returned home. He took a photo in his own apartment. The paper photo slid out. It was a picture of Elias lying in his bathtub, wrists slit, blood soaking the tiles. He threw the camera away. He vowed never to enter the bathroom again. But immediately after, Elias received an urgent call. His mother had fallen in her bathroom at her house. Elias was forced to drive there. When he arrived at his mother's house, everything seemed fine. His mother had only sprained her ankle. He breathed a sigh of relief. However, when he stepped into his mother's bathroom to clean up, he slipped on a puddle of water, and his head slammed hard into the edge of the bathtub. When he woke up, his head spinning, he found himself lying in the bathtub, a blood-stained towel wrapped around his head. He looked around. The scene matched exactly the photo of his own death. Although he hadn't slit his wrists, he had been placed into the camera's death script. Elias crawled out of the bathtub. He decided he must destroy the camera. He found it shattered in the corner of the living room where he had thrown it. He picked up a sharp fragment. He intended to smash the lens, but as he looked into the lens, he didn't see his own reflection. He saw the face of an old photographer with cold eyes, staring back. It was the spirit of the camera's creator, obsessed with documenting every moment, even the final one. A dry, whispering voice echoed from the lens. "You cannot destroy me, Elias. We are one. I am the prophet. You are the executor. You tried to change death, but you only made it more artistic." The spectral photographer smirked. "Now, let me take the final picture." Instantly, a blinding flash erupted from the broken lens fragment. Elias felt an intense, sharp pain. When the light faded, Elias saw nothing. He had gone blind. At the same moment, the final photo paper began to slide out of the broken camera. It was a picture of Elias standing in the living room, his eyes vacant and blind, and beside him, a faint photographer's spirit stood, holding a walking stick. The photographer wasn't looking at Elias, but directly into the camera lens. And beneath the photo, the old handwriting appeared. A new artist. Elias had escaped death, but was cursed to live the rest of his life in darkness, and had become a part of that spectral photographer's horrifying collection. Episode 9. The Shaman's Wood, New Mexico. The vast land of the Navajo tribe is home to the deepest mysteries. 4 friends, David, Sarah, Ken, and Lisa, all adventure enthusiasts, decided to hike through a secluded area that maps referred to as the Canyon of Whispers. They strayed into a dense forest that they knew was forbidden Navajo land. Local residents had warned them, never leave the trail. There are things there that look human, but they are not human. They are skinwalkers. A skinwalker is a malevolent witch with the ability to shapeshift into any animal or even a replica of a human being. Their purpose is to sow chaos and death. As night fell, they set up camp. Soon after, they heard strange noises. First was the howling of a wolf very close by, but it sounded too intelligent, too human-like. Then, they heard David's name being called from the edge of the forest. "David, where are you?" It was Sarah's voice, David's girlfriend. David was about to answer, but the real Sarah was sitting right next to him, huddled by the campfire. "Don't answer," the real Sarah whispered, her face pale. Lisa, impulsive by nature, decided to grab a flashlight and check. She saw a large wolf standing about 10 meters away. The wolf showed no fear. It stood on its hind legs naturally. When the flashlight shone on it, Lisa saw the wolf's eyes flash yellow, and they were distinctly human eyes. As Lisa backed away in terror, the wolf suddenly crouched down, then stood up straight, its body cracking and distorting in painful transformation. Its skin stretched and tore, and in just seconds, it morphed into a tall, gaunt, naked man, his face contorted into a twisted snarl. Lisa screamed, running back to the camp. The skinwalker had found them. The four friends plunged into the dense woods, abandoning all their gear. They ran frantically in the darkness, but the skinwalker knew exactly where they were. As they ran, the forest began to change. Ken suddenly stopped. He stared intently at a pine tree. "What is it, Ken?" David asked. Ken didn't answer. He stammered, I betrayed her. I was the one who put her in that car. I lied to the police." David looked at Ken in horror. The forest was exploiting their fears and guilt. Before Ken's eyes, the pine tree began to transform. It was no longer a tree, but morphed into a silhouette of the woman hit by the car, her body covered in blood, reaching sharp branches toward Ken. The figure didn't speak, only silently screamed inside Ken's mind. "You can't escape, Ken." A deep voice resonated from behind a bush. David and Sarah tried to pull Ken away, but he was completely paralyzed by his hallucination and fear. Lisa, having escaped the initial skinwalker, heard another call, her own mother's voice. "Mom is here, Lisa. You disappointed me. You abandoned me." Lisa turned around, seeing her mother, transformed by the skinwalker, standing there, her face tear-streaked. Lisa had been the one to leave her mother at the nursing home. The mother replica approached, not attacking physically, but whispering venomous words into Lisa's ear, causing her to collapse in regret. David and Sarah realized they couldn't fight these entities. They had to fight their own secrets. "We can't look at them. They are just our fears," David screamed. David, who was hiding a big financial secret from Sarah, felt his body shaking. He saw the figure of a man in a suit, reaching out for money, emerge from a boulder. The two tightly gripped hands closed their eyes and bolted in a single direction, ignoring the calls, the howls, and the terrifying images surrounding them. Finally, they tumbled out of the forest onto a clear dirt road. Behind them, the sounds of the skinwalkers were gone. The forest returned to silence. As they looked back at the forbidden woods, they saw two tall silhouettes, the skinwalkers, standing at the tree line, but they weren't pursuing them anymore. They just stood there, watching. David and Sarah checked each other. They were fine, but Ken and Lisa were gone. David found a small object left on the ground, a fragment of a human hand bone, covered in dirt. The bone fragment had a small ring on it, the ring Lisa always wore. The forest hadn't just awakened their fears, it had consumed those who couldn't face their own truth, turning them into a part of the darkness within the skinwalkers. Episode 10, The Final Broadcast, Denton, Texas. Sam Foster, an amateur radio enthusiast and broadcasting technician, often spent his nights scanning for rare radio frequencies. One night, precisely at 12:07 a.m., Sam accidentally tuned into a strange frequency, around 107.7 FM, he had never heard before. The signal was weak, full of static, but amidst it, there was a frightened woman's whisper. The voice was clear, but distorted by the crackle and hiss of the radio waves. "Someone, please. I'm being held here. I can't see. They're coming. The gate is closing." The voice recounted her story, disjointedly. She was Lydia Vance, a famous Texas radio host who vanished without a trace in 1950 in the middle of a live broadcast. Sam was captivated. He recorded the entire signal. He noticed that Lydia's voice wasn't an old recording, but a live broadcast, as it reacted to the current static and atmospheric conditions. Over several nights, Sam began to decode the hidden information within the static. He discovered Lydia was transmitting coordinates, encoded in very fast Morse code. Sam decided to investigate. He looked up old library records and files. He found that in 1950, Lydia's studio was located in the basement of an old broadcasting plant that had been shut down and sealed off. Sam drove to the location, a dilapidated old concrete building outside the city. He used the coordinates to pinpoint the exact location of the former studio. He found the abandoned studio. Everything was preserved from 1950, covered in dust. The old microphone was still on the desk, but the cable had been severed. Sam set up his amateur radio equipment. He tuned back to the 107.7 FM frequency. Static. This time, Lydia's voice was louder, as if she were standing right behind him. "You came, you found me. They said I would be forgotten." "Lydia, where are you?" Sam yelled into the microphone. Lydia's voice trembled. "I'm in the wall. You have to find the crack. I'm trapped by the frequency keepers. They pushed me into the interdimensional void so I would keep broadcasting forever." Sam looked around. He saw a small, dark crack on the concrete wall behind the old microphone. He used a crowbar to pry the crack open. As the crack widened, a blast of unnatural, frigid air rushed out, carrying the scent of ozone and burnt metal. Sam looked inside the crack. It wasn't brick wall, but an infinite black void where distorted images of radio stations and equipment floated. And in the middle of that space, he saw Lydia Vance. She was suspended in mid-air, her face horrifically aged, but her mouth incessantly whispering into an invisible microphone. She had been turned into a living transmitter. As Sam tried to reach through the crack to save her, Lydia suddenly screamed, her voice shifting, becoming cold and possessive like that of a controller. "It's too late. You heard the signal. You came to the location. You are the replacement." Immediately, the 107.7 FM frequency abruptly reversed. The signal was no longer emanating from Lydia. It began to emanate from Sam himself. Sam's body convulsed. He felt like he was being electrocuted, his soul being pulled toward the crack. He saw Lydia's arm reaching out, but not to save him, but to shove him in. As she did, her face gradually grew younger, normalizing. Lydia Vance was free. Sam understood. He was Lydia's final broadcast. She had found someone to take her place in her cursed transmission loop. Sam was pushed completely into the crack. Slam! The crack in the wall automatically sealed itself with a sheet of gray, steel-hard concrete, leaving no trace. The studio fell silent again. Outside the old plant, Sam's radio equipment was still running. The 107.7 FM frequency now broadcast only a short, dry audio clip. A man's voice, Sam's voice, whispering, terrified. "Someone, please. I'm being held here. I can't see." The cycle was complete. Sam's broadcast had begun.